Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Flik Dolby. Two Brits in a row, Flik. A Brit guy today and you today. Yes, finally, we love you, Americans, but we just need some more Brits. So here we are. Looking forward to our conversation today. We had such a great chat last week. So, healing. Does it resonate with you that? To what extent does the word healing resonate with you, Flik?
It really does. Yes, I think I've always been aware of healing and the power of healing. I think from the very early on, very young age, because coming into this world, being adopted, I was very much aware that there was something different about me, and I had to make peace, if you like, with being different to my peers, different to my friends, and healing. I was very curious as a child. I thought naively that when you became an adult, you were totally healed, that you had everything sorted. So I was sort of on a mission, right? I'm going to crack this. I'm going to sort out why I'm adopted, what my story was. And by the time I'm an adult, that's it. My problems will be over. Yeah, that was a little naive.
Yeah.
But yeah,
healing. But you got on it early. You got on the healing journey. You got on the healing bus early, right?
I did. Yeah. I think because I mentioned being curious, being nosy and curious was what set me on my healing journey. And I've done a lot of things over the years, and nothing's been wasted. Everything has some resonance, and all the things I've done have got me to where I am today. And I don't believe that I'm healed. I think it's an ongoing process. And it's a bit like they say in some therapy, there's the onion layers. You peel one layer off and something else comes up and think, oh, I'm on a good bit at the moment. But then, something happens in life and it's a trigger for something else deeper down that I have to look at. So, yeah, it's an ongoing process.
So you talked about difference and making peace with the difference. Is that what healing means to you then? Being at peace with the difference? Or is there another dimension?
I think being at peace and acceptance. I think for me, to get to the point where I accept that I chose, because I think I did choose to be adopted, is quite, I feel at peace with that. And also knowledge, like knowledge is power. And I think when I then found out who my mother was, who my father was, where I came from, that gave me a sense of peace. So that I think that was part of the jigsaw puzzle in my healing process, because there wasn't anything else that I didn't know.
Yeah. I mean, you said I chose to be adopted, and you linked that to acceptance. To me, acceptance, that's a little bit low. That seems lower to, somebody says I chose to be adopted, and then say I accept, I accept being adopted. Accepted doesn't seem to be quite on the same, it would a word like grateful and we know that's a loaded term, right? I can't think of anything. Can't think of a different word. I'm getting a slight imbalance between acceptance and saying I chose to be adopted.
Well, I definitely think I chose to be adopted, and that came first. So I realized I chose this path, this life. Before I came in, there's A to Z of what you want. So I went, because I'm curious and nosy, let's get on with it. I'll go for the adoption one. But within that, growing up, there were some complications. There were some things that I didn't really understand and I struggled with. And I think in learning about my adoption and in learning who I was and insecurities, things that I had, being quite sensitive, that was part of parcel of being adopted. So I think that's where the acceptance comes in, so that I could look better at my frailties, if you like, and think, well, I accept who I am. Because you get bombarded with people with having judgments. Even my adopted parents, there was judgment, not from my father, but definitely my mother. And then friends, families, teachers, everyone's got an opinion on me and my story. So I think to sort of sort all that through, grace is a good word. I think I've come to a place of grace.
Yeah.
Acceptance.
Yeah. Grace fits better with I chose to be adopted than acceptance somehow. And I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit hung up on the words. So I apologize.
All right, you don't like that word?
It's been, yeah, just a slight imbalance, really. I'm going to blame being in publishing for 22 years, despite not being very good at English. So, now you talked about choosing to. Do you remember the moment when you had that thought for the first time?
Which
the I chose to be adopted thought. Do you remember that? Remember having that thought for the first time?
No, it's a bit like I never remember the day I knew I was adopted, you know, when I was told. But I think I was very young. I was very young, a baby, that yeah. I think I also had such a strong connection with my birth mother, and I knew that. It was like visceral. I always knew I would meet her. So I think, I don't know where that came from, that sort of knowing that that was my part. And I also knew very early on that I probably wasn't meant to be with her for long in this lifetime. So I don't know where that came from, but it was a really strong feeling. And strangely enough, when I met her, I was about 20, 19, 20. And she didn't live much longer, and she lived up in the north, I'm in the south. And I was living abroad at the time. So I think I only met her about 3 times before she became ill, and then died. And it was like, gosh, thank God I did it when I did it. And
Yeah.
that came from that knowing that I've got to do it.
Yeah. Something tells me that you might be into kind of reincarnation and coming back multiple times, and this time I choose it.
Maybe.
Are you into that?
Yeah. I kind of do think I believe in past lives. Yeah, I don't know.
No, it was just something the way you said when you said I chose to be adopted.
Yeah.
Something was running in the background for me. She's going to say this time round, you know, this
Yeah.
time, and it's a strange line of questioning for me to go down, because I'm not really into that, so I can't ask you any meaningful questions about it. So let's go back.
I'm wearing your subconscious. Maybe you are.
Well, maybe I am, yeah, or maybe maybe I was in a previous life.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I was. Yeah. So you talked about the fact that none of that you've done a lot of different things and none of them are wasted. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I've done talking therapy. I've done healing.
Like energy work stuff.
Yeah, yeah. There was a guy many years ago who he lived locally to me, and he was a dowser, you know, with a pendulum. And
yeah. So these are the people that have the 2 pieces of metal in the hands and they find the water.
Or a pendulum, you know, with a.
Oh, they would do it with the pendulum.
Yeah. He picked up a lot of stuff, and I at the time I'm so into it, but I'm really cynical. But yeah, I've done that. What else have I done? Lots of body work. But
Yeah,
and then I did something called the Landmark Forum,
yeah.
which is
You mentioned that last time, yeah, when we
yeah,
were speaking, yeah,
that was very powerful for me because the reason I did that was when Tony Robbins, you know, the peak
yeah,
performance coach, he came over to England to do seminars in the early 90s, and I worked for him. And all his trainers did Landmark Forum, and they were, a lot of them, qualified hypnotherapists. So I thought, well, if they do that and they're successful, that's what I'm going to do. But doing the Landmark Forum was incredible because you go there for 3 days and you have a therapist at the front. And when I did it, there were about 500 people in the room. And they said, you've got to make peace with your parents. So I'm thinking, well, my parents, which parents? Is it my adopted parents or is it my birth parents? So I put my hand up and I said, well, I'm a little bit confused. Which parents are you talking about? And she turned around because they've got notes on everybody. And she said, your birth parents, you've got to make peace with your birth parents. Can you get hold of them? And I was like, well, my father, I knew, lived in Australia. And my mother, she was up, but she was very ill at that point. But I somehow managed to get hold of my birth father's telephone number and rang him very early one morning in Australia and made peace with him, which I didn't know I was going to do that when I went on the Landmark Forum, but it was amazingly, it was a really great seminar. And
because
also
I've heard it's a bit hard. I've heard it's a bit hardcore.
uh, there's a certain language that they use which can be a little bit annoying, but when I did it, which was many years ago, they said it's sort of you're making an inquiry about your life. You're just looking at your life over a 3 day period, and then at the end of the 3 days, you sort of like have a blank canvas and say, well, how do I want to be and what do I want to do moving forward? So is that hardcore? It's like when people say, oh, you've been brainwashed by going on a seminar. I kind of, that doesn't really bother me because I think, well, if someone's helping me go into my brain and clean it out and put it back together and I feel better, then okay, call it brainwashing.
Yeah, I like mind blowing. The word mind blowing, you know, because you know, I think my mind could do with a bit of blowing. You know, if you could get a mind blower like a leaf blower, because especially all the left brain not good enough stuff.
Yeah, that's a classic adoptee trait, isn't it?
Yeah, and 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 I know a lot of non-adoptees have got it too. That I could do with that blowing away. You know, I could do with my brain being washed. Yeah, it's a good thing. Yeah, when my wife repairs, I went on a big retreat thing 17 years ago, and then I went back for another 4 days, a couple of to be kind of trained in it to an extent. A couple of years after that, so 3-4 years after that, and she refers to those people as chicken worshippers. That's I guess that's how people who are a little bit different from the norm, right? Talking about being at peace with different, that's how they, I guess that's how they view stuff.
Yeah.
That's a bit different.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just thinking of other things like Rolfing technique. Have you heard of Rolfing and Feldenkrais and Crystal? I've done the whole 9 yards.
Yeah. So you mentioned this before we started recording today and last week about this work that you do and the mind body connection. So can you tell us what that healing journey has been like for you? You talked about learning kinesiology and having some big insights.
Yeah. Well, the power of kinesiology is that it's you're asking your body for answers. You can ask it questions, and your body will give you the answers. And it's done on a subconscious level. So if I can put my ego to one side and ask the body will guide me down and tell me where there's some imbalances, and they can be structural, they can be nutritional, they can be emotional, they can be electrical imbalances. And we are kind of quite complicated beings. And the power of kinesiology is massive. It's helped me on my balancing my hormones, certain time of life, that they can go awry. But a huge impact has been on, you mentioned it earlier, not feeling good enough. And where does that come from? And you can track back and ask back, which happened to me in my training. When did you first feel that you weren't good enough? And I think I went back, I can't remember specifically, but it was almost in utero that feeling was implanted. And are you ready to release it? You ask your body, yes, no. It can do such a myriad of amazing things, from helping people from getting over operations, injuries I mentioned to you before. It is, I don't know why it's not so widely used, because when you get that gut feeling, it's like that, but it's just on a much more powerful level. Things that we naturally do, like some might hold your head, that's actually a really good thing to do when you're stressed or upset. We actually use a lot of the tools, but we don't realize we're using them. And you mentioned Americans. The Americans are much more into kinesiology, applied kinesiology, which is the derivative that I've been trained in. And sadly, maybe we're a bit too cynical in this country, but it's an uphill struggle to kind of get it more accepted and used. But it's phenomenal. I worked with a lady the other day. She said she had a knee injury, but when she came to me, I ascertained that actually the injury was in her hip. And she'd been going to see a physio for the last couple of months. He hadn't even done any physical work on her, told her to do some exercises. And in a couple of sessions, it completely sorted it out. So, yeah, it is. I can't sing its praises enough, really.
So it would be, if people, I shared with you before, and I've talked about this on the podcast, that I'm doing some somatic experiencing work at the moment. I did a session this morning, which was very powerful. The somatic and the kinesiology, they're kind of in the same realm, right?
Yeah, yeah. Because the somatic is sort of movement of the body, isn't it? It's allowing energy to be released, which is very similar to kinesiology. We work on meridian lines, the lymphatic system, and it's releasing blocked energy. And if we think of ourselves as, all our experiences of X number of years, emotional things that have happened, injuries, something somebody said, school, whatever, we kind of keep filling up our tank with lots of blocked energy. And somatic work and kinesiology and hypnotherapy and massage to a certain extent help release and move the blocked energy. So I don't know whether how you felt after your session this morning, but did you feel a bit tired or?
No, I was okay. I don't lighter somehow, maybe lighter, just less on the shoulders.
Yeah. So you felt like you released something.
I felt like I'm released something. And right now, I'm feeling a little bit of frustration because inside around on this topic, yeah, because I think there's, as you were talking about the body coding stuff, you know, we always go anywhere near there. I go, you know, the body keeps the score, the Bessel van der Kolk book and all. And there's so much trauma education, and it helps us understand it to a certain extent, understand the source of the trauma, but it doesn't help us healing, you know. And so what we're trying to do here on Thriving Adoptees is healing education, right? So find out what's helped you, and then like all the other conversations I've been having, and you know, put them into a framework. And one of the things that I think the Western world has missed is they kind of overestimate the psychological part of healing, and they underestimate the other parts, and people don't even talk about different parts, right? Until like a fellow adoptee, I think Terry, she talked about it. She just rattled them off. Well, types of healing. She said, well, obviously psychological, emotional, physical, which is somatic stuff, relational, social, and essential. And then she just rattled them off, and I just thought, hold on a minute, like we live in a world, like Nancy Verrier talked about it being holistic, psychological, and everything, right? In as her describing the wound, but the second book is, as far as I can remember, kind of pure play psychological stuff, and everybody talks about this somatic stuff, but there's a mismatch between understanding trauma and healing it, and I'm like, why is nobody? We're all looking in the wrong place. We're all focusing on the wrong stuff.
I think it's a really good point. I think with the therapeutic, intellectual, psychological healing modalities, it can be written down, and it can be, you know, 1+1, you know, it's formulaic. But to do physical healing work is so individual, and it's, my healing is going to be different to your healing, and what might work for me one day might not work for me the next. We as I said before, we're complicated beings, and I don't think you can put it in a book and sell it. It's like an art form, you know, it's just very, very different. And I think it's hard to quantify it. And that's where people, what they want, oh, if I do this, this, and this, you're going to be healed. No, you might get some reliefs. And then and also it's about us taking responsibility for our own thoughts and feelings. And that, again, you know, I might have a week where I don't feel like doing anything that's particularly good for me on my healing journey. But again, trying to tell somebody you need to take responsibility and find what works for you. And it might not be one thing, it might be a myriad of things.
Yeah.
It's quite challenging.
Yeah, it can't be written down. It can't be. Well, it's you know, the trauma's pre-verbal for us, so
Yeah.
like the healing pre-verbal, and reading some very interesting stuff now that from this neuroscientist. I'll plug him a little bit. I forgot his name. That's good. It'll come back to me, and I'll put it in the show notes. What it pre-verbal and subconscious are kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Pre-verbal. Did you hear that? Can you hear that? What's going on in the background? No. Two really big Chinook helicopters just flew over about 300 foot above them of the house. yeah, pre-verbal and subconscious are the same thing. So pre-verbal, non-verbal. Pre-verbal is the same as non-verbal. Non-verbal, non-conscious. It means, you know, you can't. We're not aware of it. We can't put it into.
But on some level, we are, and that's in kinesiology. You can test the body back and go back to the very, very beginning.
Spot on. Yeah, I used the wrong word. I don't know what the right word is. I don't know what the right is. Yeah,
it's a feeling and it's an energy, and you know the trauma. You can ask the body, is that still affecting you? Where is it affecting you? Which part of the body is it affecting you? Which is phenomenal insight of how much healing one can do by just challenging the body through muscle testing. I mean, and that just really excites me because I think we're all meant to, I feel, heal ourselves. We have the technology. We have the capability to heal ourselves. But it's what I mentioned before. My ego can get in the way because I think, oh, I should be doing that. I should be doing that. And also, I think with the work I do in 12-step recovery, that's when you hand things over to something, a higher power, whatever your God is to you. Asking for help is okay. And that's a phenomenal healing tool, I think.
Yeah. So I remembered the book. It's called No Self, No Problem by Chris Niebauer. And I'm also going to plug another book, which I plug all the time, which is the one I recommended to you, this David Hawkins book, Power versus Force, which is all about, well, the first half is about kinesiology. So he's developed in the 60s, 70s, a scale of human consciousness, but it was developed using muscle testing. And muscle testing is it, would you call that one form of kinesiology? I don't know, is it?
It's a pretty major part of it because you're challenging the body with various muscle testing. Yeah.
Yeah. So do any particular healing moments come to mind? I think we've gone out macro, we're going to zoom back into micro.
And in my life, any healing moments?
Anything particular comes to mind?
I think getting the first letter from my birth mother was a huge moment of sort of validation. I think, you know, it was a really good experience. It was a lovely experience. And I was living in Spain at the time, and it was the first letter I got when I arrived there. And just her accepting me and getting in contact with me just made me feel okay. I thought, oh, it was like a weight had been lifted off me. So I think that was really powerful.
Yeah.
And not everybody has a great reunion, which is sad. But for me, it was very, very good.
You used the word, did you say validating or something? Because when I say the word validation, I normally think of a belief. But validating us as a being, right? Feeling valid. That seems to take validation to a whole new level, right?
Yeah. It's because, you know, for me as an adoptee, I was two people. You know, I got christened twice. So, I was christened Bernadette by my birth mother, and then I was adopted as Felicity Flik. You know, it's like there were two people, and it was almost like when I heard from my birth mother, she recognized and was validating the person I was born. and it was very powerful. It's like I've done a lot of inner child work, and I don't think I've got one inner child. I've got several of them. So there's the pre-adopted one, and then there's the newly adopted one, and then there's the toddler, and then there's a teen, and there's the rebel teen. There's quite a few, but she gave me validation for being born, I think, being born, her child. And I kind of, that was really, really powerful, very important.
Like, I can't.
Yeah, I was a somebody to her.
Yeah.
No, I was only with her for 6 weeks, but I was that person. I was that baby to her, and that was significant.
Yeah.
And because when you're adopted, it's like, well, adopted. This is who you are now. And I wasn't encouraged to look and find out where I came from. I was really put off it, but it didn't work. So you take on an identity that is part of your adopted family. So you're sort of making things up as you go along.
So are you comparing, contrasting, different and valid? Are these two opposites for you?
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, she definitely gave me, I definitely felt I was a different baby than the one I became when I was adopted. So she kind of validated that there was this other baby that was born that wasn't the one that was then brought up in my adopted family.
I was going to say she validated your pre-adoption personality.
Yeah, but also,
Yeah.
also when I met her, I absolutely knew her. It's like the feeling she had for me was so familiar, and the love she had for me, I knew the feeling, and that was extraordinary to think, because I didn't even know I knew it until I felt it.
So there's a lot of kind of intuition stuff you're talking about. Does this feel like intuition?
Yeah.
No.
Well, if like the work I do, I think everything's stored in our bodies. That love she had for me was in my psyche somewhere, and when I met her, it was like the switch went on. I went, "Oh my gosh, that's familiar. I remember that one." So, and maybe I was quite in tune, I'd say.
Yeah. And did she look like you?
No, not really. I look more like my natural father. Um, he had I used to have very curly hair. He had curly hair. My my birth mother, she used to perm her hair, but I don't think I look much like her, but I did go to Ireland, where she was from. I went to her funeral when she died, but a couple of years later, I went to Ireland and I was with my siblings, and we went to visit somebody locally. And the guy answered the door, and my brother was about to introduce me, and he said, "Oh, I know who you are. There's no mistaking you're Rose's daughter." And I went, "How do you know that?" He said, "The chin, the eyes." And I went, "Wow."
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a weird thing. It's a fascinating thing about adoptees. It's like the mannerisms you take on from your nurturing and your upbringing versus the inherited. And my cousins used to say to me, "Oh my God, the way you use your hands is just like your mum." And I'd go, "Well, I'm just using my hands." No. And it's nurture versus nature. It's an incredible thing. It's sort of, we're almost ambidextrous.
Has curiosity been the biggest driver of all this? Because you
Yeah, definitely.
Stuff, yeah.
I think growing up, when children can be nice or not so nice, and people ask questions, I think I used to get annoyed, thinking, "Well, why don't I know where I'm from and who I am? Why do it's my right to know?" But that didn't get received with much enthusiasm from my adopted mother. But yeah, I was thinking, surely as children on this planet, we've got a right to know where we've come from. To me, it was like a no-brainer. It was sort of, I need to know and I want to know.
Yeah.
So yeah, curiosity.
Because there's still 40 of the 50 states which are closed in the US. And like we've been open since 75, I think.
Yeah.
1975. My mum, that scared my mum when that
Well,
happened.
and you can understand it. Yeah. Yeah. But nowadays it's different, isn't it? They're much more open with communication and where people have come from. But yeah.
Yeah.
I used to say to my mother, I said, I feel like I'm sitting on a fence and I'm in the middle, and I look to the left, my past, and I think, well, that's a woman that went through all that she went through and gave the child up. So she's got all her thoughts and feelings. And I'm thinking, I want to know about her. And then I'm sitting here and then I'm looking to you and my present and my future. And you've got all your thoughts and feelings about why you had to adopt a child. And I'm thinking, well, okay, what about me? I need to know both sides. And that I was told, well, you might upset somebody. She may not have told her new husband. You could really upset a family, but it still didn't work. It's like, okay, I still want to know.
Yeah. There's something big there. Something pennies just dropped for me in terms of us worrying about upsetting people.
People pleasing.
Yeah, well, there's people pleasing. There's not upsetting them as well. Like so, trying to insert ourselves into our biological family. Well, no, that's trying to insert ourselves into our biological family's life. Let's put it that way, rather than inserting into family, because that sounds not quite right. That and I've thought about this. I have thought about this a lot since getting. I know I have two half brothers, and I've been told not by my biological father not to call his number again. But I could, but do I want to cause the upset? Do I want to cause the upset? Do I really want to know them? But it kind of, if you compare that sort of upset with the relinquishment trauma upset, it's chalk and cheese, isn't it? It's like,
yeah, because you have a choice now if you want to get in touch with your half brothers or not. I'm guessing, do they know about you?
No.
I'm
sure I'm sure their mother doesn't know about them. It doesn't know about me. This was 1966.
Yeah, same.
When he signed the little piece of paper away, and the next thing he knew was me ringing him last October. So
is he on your original birth certificate?
He was, yeah, but it's quite a common name. But connecting with a cousin, I found the name of the city that he lived, and I put his name and the city into Google, and
Dr. Google
up popped his telephone number. Right. So
yeah, but you were saying, the original, the trauma of being adopted is one thing, isn't it? But then,
and us worrying about causing a little bit of family upset. So
yeah. And it's bound to, isn't it? Because it's like my circumstances. My birth parents then got married about a year after I was born, and went on to have 3 children. So I've got 3 siblings, full siblings.
Full siblings.
Yeah. And they didn't know about me until each of them were about age 16, and then my mother told them, and they were keen to meet me. But that is it. I kind of am in touch with them, but you go in, you are different. You were taken away different, and then you can, in my case, I could go back in, but I'm not part of, really. It is complicated.
Yeah. So is there anything that you feel has kind of got in the way of your healing journey?
No, I think the only thing I think possibly is how society hasn't really, up until I discovered you, and so much work that's been done over the last probably, I don't know, 10, 15 years about adoption. It's been such a closed shop, I think. I told you last week, sort of, my brother I grew up with was adopted. I had a school friend outside school, and a college friend. They're the only adopted people I knew, and nobody really talked about it. I think society's lack of compassion, I think, has probably heeded some of my healing, because there's a lot of ignorance around adoption from my point as well as everybody else, and I think thankfully now there is much more dialogue and conversation, and the open book about adoption, which needs to happen.
Yeah.
Because I've done a bit of work in prisons, and it's full of adopted people, and there's a lot of trauma about being adopted, and it's about time one can get more help. And I went on my journey on my own, didn't even know there was much help out there.
It's very different these days.
Yeah, thank goodness.
Yeah. That
has to happen, doesn't it?
Is there anything you'd like to share that I've not asked you about, Flik?
I don't think so.
I'm just going to lean into your intuition here. Don't always do this, but any ideas come to mind about what to call this conversation when I release the episode?
An interesting question. I feel that for me, trusting my instincts, trusting our body, something to do with trust, I think.
Yeah.
Trust in the process of our healing.
Cool. Thank you very much. And thank you to listeners. We'll speak to you again very soon.
Thank you so much, Simon.
You're welcome.